Good afternoon, everyone. It was a year ago that our greater Cleveland community was turned upside down as the reality of the pandemic began to take hold of our lives and of our organizations. At the Leadership Center, as we considered how to recognize this somber milestone, not surprisingly, we immediately thought of great leaders. We thought of how critical leadership was in those early moments and how critical it remained in the days, weeks, and sadly, the months that followed. So we identified and we reached out to 4 superstars, 4 amazingly resilient and tenacious leaders who were essential in offering the guidance and reassurance that we needed to move our community forward. All 4 of them faced unimaginable challenges in their leadership, and they powered through, usually with great personal sacrifice. They are the best of the best in Cleveland. We salute them, we applaud them, and we thank them for modeling true leadership when it was needed most. Thank all of you for joining our conversation today, and join me in welcoming Eric Gordon, CEO of Cleveland Metropolitan School District, Dr. Margaret McKenzie, the president of South Pointe Hospital and the Cleveland Clinic Health System, Elizabeth McIntyre, executive editor of Crain's Cleveland Business, and Kristin Warzocha, the president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. I'm going to pose some personal questions for each of them about their leadership and what they face, but I want to start with one question, which I think you all want to hear the answer to from each one, and that is, what was the toughest leadership challenge that you faced this year? And we're going to start with Kristin.
Oh. I think the toughest challenge was back at the beginning. When the governor first issued his stay-at-home order, we had a whole lot of problems that came on all at once. First and foremost, of course, was the sudden and skyrocketing need for food. The demand for emergency food from folks who had been newly unemployed just went absolutely through the roof. At the same time, we typically serve clients through a network of about 1,000 programmatic partners. Well, a few hundred of those programmatic partners closed overnight because they were an after-school program, for example, located in a school that was forced to close, or a senior meals program at a senior citizen center that had to close, or it was a food pantry run entirely by senior citizen volunteers whose doctors told them to stay home. To be safe. And so we had, this rising need. We had fewer partners open to meet the need. Our food donations just plummeted overnight. We about 50% of our food is from donations from the food industry. Many times it's surplus product. But if you go into a Giant Eagle and they're empty shelves, it means there's no surplus product. And we had 1,600 volunteers who canceled over a period of about 2 weeks, because, we get volunteers from corporations and schools and all sorts of organizations that suddenly weren't gathering. And so I think it was right there in that moment where we had so many problems to solve all at once. But thankfully, we've got an amazing team and everybody pulled together and, we did one thing at a time, figured it out.
Probably with very little sleep. True. So, Margaret, you were facing some similar challenges in your service to those in need. Can you tell us what was the top of the list for you?
Well, it was very difficult. I think that the most difficult part was starting to watch staff react as patients were coming in and vented and dying without the capacity to have their family be close by. That was really tough because they would gather around each other and there would be tears. They would be crying for the families who weren't there. So for me, it was really watching the caregivers here who were family for the people who were dying because their families were not allowed to be with them. And they were also caring for one another as they were going through that. And then the second part that was hard was there was a lot of uncertainty. Many people, and for me, that was hard, getting to a point where we could reassure them that the Cleveland Clinic will have your back. But nobody believed it because they never had an opportunity to see this sort of thing happen before. So those were hard.
Yeah, that's a lot. Eric, I can't even imagine what was swirling in your world in those early days and over the course of the year.
Yeah, I think that maybe it's because it's the most proximate, but opening was the hardest for us. We actually, kids are back today. I hugged my 5-year-old granddaughter before she went into school today, and then got her socially distanced into line. But getting there for our community with the level of care and attention that they deserve was incredibly difficult. Margaret, what you said about the empathy for families just really resonated with me, because I have a lot of families that don't want to send their kids back, and I need to make sure they still have a great education. And the relationship that students, parents, and teachers have built together this year is so far stronger in so many cases than any typical year. And so even as we have adjusted for who's coming and who's not, that may mean that we've had to adjust your teacher or your teacher team. And that's a very personal disruption. And then adding on it the anxiety of an industry that is coming back and working with large numbers of people, right, that's anxiety producing. And part of, we know this and already, but I think we've relearned it. Safety is not just about physical need, it's also about our emotional need. And how do you, just like Margaret had to do for her caregivers, how do you make sure that my educators knew that they're safe and felt so? And so I think that the last several weeks of our working through opening up, which is going great so far today, I'm super excited to say, but getting here was maybe one of the most difficult things. And I think also because the pandemic's not over, but it's not acute anymore. It doesn't feel like everything just happened. It feels like we've been doing this, right? And so, but it's still the first time that we've ever operated 37,000 kids in a hybrid experience, right? And so just moving people through that. But, you know, I've watched every day that people who were afraid to come to school on Wednesday were excited to see kids on Thursday. And you know, the enthusiasm that I saw Miss Kelly, my granddaughter's kindergarten teacher, showing today, that toughness comes with an incredible reward too when we are able to help the kids and families and educators that we're serving.
So Elizabeth, obviously you're up next. So you're not directly on the front lines, but you're on the front line in a very different way in your visibility in the community. What was hard for you, the most challenging part of the past year?
Well, we certainly weren't dealing with life and death issues the way that some of our other panelists were. But I'd say, you know, really on March 11th, that's the date that I always go back to, when things really got turned upside down. And I think there were a lot of leaders who were on the fly trying to make the best decisions they could that day about what events were going to happen and what weren't going to happen. So we were consulting with, you know, our sources at the clinic and at UH, trying to make the best informed, because we had events on the books for later in March and into April that had hundreds of people who had registered, and to make that decision to cancel or postpone it or transition it to a virtual event later in the year. So we were just trying to make the best decisions we could. Meanwhile, we had to get our reporters out into the community to report. And we didn't know, you know, how can we protect them? How can we make them safe? Because we didn't have all the information at that point about masks and everything else. So a lot of decisions, we were kind of like chickens running around with their heads cut off for a good 48 hours, I'd say.
I think we all felt that way, and it was not a good place to be. So this has been a time when everybody is constantly seeking information and what's the latest and what's true. So Elizabeth, you had the awesome and daunting responsibility of filtering all the information that was flowing your way and making decisions about how and what to prioritize and what to disseminate to the public. How did you even begin to tackle that?
Well, you know, it's really interesting. We're fortunate at Crain's Cleveland that we know what our audience wants from us. They want information on how they can best manage and run their business. So that was the filter that we put a lot of the information that was coming out at us all at once through that filter of what does a business leader need to know to operate. And we also got a very clear message from our audience that they didn't want all COVID all the time. They wanted to know what they needed to do, but they also wanted to know what else was going on. We couldn't feed them a steady diet of all COVID. So we really made it an effort to give them what they needed, but also give them other things that they can consume.
Yeah, but we all needed to take a break from the COVID diet every once in a while to get some healthy content. So Eric, in your position, you are answerable to so many different constituencies, your educators, your scholars, parents, community members, government leaders, the union, the press, and more that I can't even fathom. How in the past year have you managed to address their concerns and keep moving forward, always wanting to do the best for your children? And I know you always refer to them as your children.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've used kind of just two companion mantras the whole time. The first is that people are looking for their leaders to show what I call a bounded optimism and a deliberate calm. And so, you know, I'm not running around going, oh, isn't this great? COVID is so neat, because it's not. But people do want to know that it's going to be okay. And they want to know, and here's what we're going to do, right? And so that bounded optimism and deliberate calm has just been something that I've continued to say to myself and to my team, even when I didn't feel calm or even optimistic. But that when people looked to me in the district, they had to have that message. And then communicate. And so, you know, I don't think I've had one interview I've said no to at the local level, not because I love to be on TV every time I turn around or in Crain's or anywhere else, but because it's a vehicle to communicate. I make video messages that go out every single week, that are on social media, on the website. We IVR, which is a robocall, we text, we email, and we try to tell the story over and over, and including having ask your question here and then using that for the communication, which is incredibly hard to do. And I actually was going to piggyback with Elizabeth. I think Crain's Cleveland in particular, compared to many of the companion pieces, really did a great job of focusing on the digital divide and schools and things that business-oriented organizations sometimes don't privilege. And that helped, because it's another audience that I need to be ready to help or respond, to hold at the table. And so just really proud of the work that Elizabeth and her team of reporters did to help with that communication, because it's unique to our city. If you pick up a Crain's or you Google the Crain's of other cities, you don't see that breadth of content in the same way that you see it here. So, participating as a larger picture. How do we get straight to my parents, straight to my students, straight to my educators, but also how do we inform a larger community? And I think that our local press did that really, really well.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. It's not just Crain's Cleveland business, it's Crain's Cleveland community in so many ways. It's just such a great voice. So Eric, you talked about communicating, and that has been so hard because we've all had to communicate in new ways. You can't just walk down the hall and pop into somebody's office or pick up the phone. And Margaret, with your team, where you're up at the top and you've got so many different layers and levels, all who need to hear from you. You're working to save lives. They're exhausted. They're frightened. How did you keep your team and your healthcare workers informed, connected, and giving them that reassurance that we're going to get through this?
Well, we actually work for a very great organization, okay? And yes, I drank the Kool-Aid, but it's warranted, right? The Cleveland Clinic actually really rose to the occasion and communicated every strength, every weakness, every failure, every success. They cascaded very transparently throughout the organization. And so that gave us content and data that we could drive down to our local hospitals. And so it was, I would say, communication refined, And I hope that that is the one lesson that we learned from all of this, how not to do that. We also were able to leverage a lot of our, we reached out to our philanthropists along with the Cleveland Clinic, who then made sure that people were fed, because people were doing double shifts, because as employees got sick, we were really short-staffed many times, and we kept people longer than their shifts. And it was great because they were able to bring meals, 3-4 meals a day for people, everyone in the building, not just the nurses, not just, the environmental service workers. And so, those things are things that helped us to keep everyone engaged, reassure them. We provided a lot of psychological support. We told people we recognized that it was going to be fear, not just of losing your income, but also fear of getting the disease, fear of losing a family member. And so we really rallied around them and communicated, and probably over communicated as things were happening. And so nobody was left in the dark. They always knew what was going on. So that's how we rallied in that space.
That's amazing. I'm going to pose one question. I'm going to, any of you jump in, or all of you jump in. So we hear a lot, and it's true that leadership can be really lonely. So over the course of the past year, you've had your peers, your probably go-to group of leaders that you rely upon. They're all facing their own challenges. Everybody in your organization is looking up to you for guidance. So how did you cope? How did you summon the strength? Were there any particularly low points personally? And throw it out for any of you to answer.
So I'm in a, I don't know if you know this, Marianne, but I'm in a commuter marriage, okay? My husband works in Seattle. And let me tell you, we could not see each other. We used to see each other every other weekend. We couldn't see each other. My mother lives in South America. She's 89 years old. And I'm used to running home and seeing her. I will tell you, those are things that were low points for me. And I think that the other thing that was the lowest point was watching my neighbors. I live in an older community, and watching my neighbors' kids drive by and honking the horn because they could not go in to see their elder parents. I would say those were the low points that really challenged me. But again, it allowed me to really reflect on why I went into medicine, right? And I went into medicine to give my life for other people. I really did. I know it sounds very altruistic, but that is something that kept me going, and it kept me, I was able to focus on what matters most, which was that I was here for patients and my community. And so and anybody who knows me will tell you that that's who I am. And so, that's really how I found my strength during those low times. Lots of FaceTime, and I did a lot of reflective writing, and I actually have developed a writing habit because of it. So that's a good thing for me. Yeah.
Oh, good for you. Careful. Elizabeth may be tapping you to become one of her contributors. So, Kristin, I saw that you unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. I mean, it was a challenging year in lots of different ways. Our team here, we were all essential workers. And we have a lot of folks who, similar to Margaret, you probably have more, Margaret, but had to be in our office every day. In our, you can't distribute prepared meals unless you've got your team in the kitchen, and you can't deliver meals unless you've got all of your drivers coming into work, and our order pickers. And, we had this crew that absolutely had to be here. And so, most management was here too, right? It's just the right thing to do. But it was challenging at the beginning because folks were scared. They saw lots of their colleagues, family members who were working from home. And God bless them. They got up and came to work every day anyway, but they were really scared about it. And my husband works from home, and my kids, of course, were learning from home. And I have this habit, I get up really early every day. And so when I leave for work, everybody's still asleep. And I walk around the second floor of our house, and I kiss everyone on the cheek, and I say, have a great day. And so, one night my husband, dad to my kids, he said, I hate to ask you to do this, but I think you're going to have to stop that for a while. Because he was afraid I was going to bring COVID home, right? to the rest of the family. And, you know, just made me really sad. But I stopped it for a while because you got to do what you got to do. And I needed to be in my office with so many folks on our team. And I'm just grateful for them, for their bravery and their determination. And, you know, we had some folks who could work from home. And so we, of course, allowed them and encouraged them to work from home just to make space in the building for the folks who couldn't, right? And they were great sports about it too. But you know what? Everyone showed up every single day. And we couldn't have done it without them.
Okay, well, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, it was those moments when I realized, you know, oh, this is going to be longer than we thought. So we were told to take a 3-week spring break, if you remember, and that this would all be done. We'd flatten the curve and we'd be back to school last April. Then it was the rest of the year. Then it was, oh, through the summer, but fall will be okay. And then fall wasn't okay. And I think it was those moments that just the mental exhaustion of thinking about, okay, now we have to figure out this next thing and this next thing. But for me, and this is something I've always done, and I would encourage everyone to do, I have something called a smile file. And I have now an electronic one and a paper one. And the small kindnesses that people have shown all along the way, that I will probably never open that folder and read through again, but they're there and I know they're there. Sitting right here on my desk, it's one of the few things that's paper-based I still have out. And you know, literally on Saturday, one of my principals from my School of the Arts sent a piece of video of our students doing art that he said, just wanted you to know that that we're all thinking of you. And you know, and so those little niceties along the way, you know, have been the thing that I've said, okay, so get over it, move on, you know, and solve this. And so, you know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the low moments. It's actually so many of those little highlights along the way that have, you know, carried me through.
It's so true. You have to keep looking for those bright spots. Otherwise, it can just devour you. Totally. Elizabeth?
You know, you really had to fight the despair at times. And I think that, you know, trying to remain positive sometimes felt like so much work. But for me, what really kind of culminated was the racial reckoning with George Floyd's death. That going through the pandemic was hard enough, but then to have to confront what we've been living with as a country for hundreds of years in a very profound way, that was tough. That was tough, and recognizing we still have so far to go. I just think the combination of those two things for me, it was the thing that that got me down.
Yeah, and all of us, that was just a really hard, I don't want to say burden, but just very hard for all of us to confront and to carry forward. Thank you for recognizing that. All of you who are on this call, as our speakers can tell you, I have about 2 pages of questions, so I could keep talking to them all afternoon, but it's your voices. You've tuned in. So please, if you have a question, put it in the chat and Rachel's going to make sure that gets asked. So I will, Rachel, are you ready or should I pose one more question?
Yeah, no, we've had a couple questions come in.
Okay.
To start, and this is for everyone, so ask that you jump in. Can you name one or a couple unexpected partner organizations from any sector that supported you or your organization during this difficult time?
Sure, I'll take that one. We have a very, very long list. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when the governor issued the shutdown orders and all of our volunteers canceled overnight, we had an emergency weekend meeting of the Ohio Association of Food Banks. We're one of 12 food banks in Ohio who do what we do. It was a Sunday morning, and we were all struggling with the same thing. And we decided that that meeting at the suggestion of a very smart executive director who runs a food bank in Dayton, right near Wright Pat Air Force Base. She was thinking that maybe we could get some additional help. And so we asked the governor to send in the National Guard. And within a week, he had deployed National Guardsmen, National Guard soldiers to every food bank across the state. And I don't know that we certainly couldn't have done what we did last year without them. I don't think we could be even operating now at the level we're operating now without them. So we've got 50 full-time National Guard soldiers who are stationed at our food bank, filling in for volunteers, filling in for our staff. It's absolutely incredible. We also had just tons of community organizations who stepped up, our partner agencies who were able to remain open, who got really creative about how they were going to provide more food. Donors, we've got a lot of donors on this call who stepped forward to help either with a financial contribution. I mean, because food donations dropped so much, we had to buy a lot more food. I mean, we bought roughly twice the amount of food we'd ever purchased before last year. So in 2020 over 2019, we're going to buy twice as much in 2021 than we did in 2020. And a lot of that is thanks to donor support. And then we had people who just did really nice things like call us up and say, can we buy lunch for your team? And it was just such a sweet, thoughtful thing to do that helped us reinforce to our team members how important they were and how people were watching and they saw their hard work.
And I'm going to jump in and say, I agree, right? I will tell you, I hope that nobody being in healthcare, Little Caesars is the last place I would go for pizza. I will tell you, Little Caesars kept sending pizza here every single day, so much so that, employees were looking forward to it. So I will say that, and then there are many other agencies, sandwich shops, a lot of pizza shops would just spontaneous acts of kindness, just show up. We didn't ask anything. And then of course, our board of trustees were so generous that they actually wanted to care for the employees and provide food here for South Pointe, as well as a lot of philanthropists through the Cleveland Clinic. And so they just rose to the occasion. And I think what surprised the staff here is, and I think it helped with loyalty, even though that wasn't the plan, that the meals came for every person. We have 1,100 plus employees. That's how much food would show up for each shift. Even, people who could afford it, it doesn't really matter, who didn't have a spouse who was out. And it's amazing how we rally around food, right? Because it feeds your soul somehow, not just your body. And so that really helped employees to volunteer for extra shifts. We had quite a few of our employees who were out because of COVID. And we even have a few long haulers who are still out for more than 6 months. But just to know that their peers can actually jump in and help them out because they knew that they'll be cared for was good.
I think it's really also important to recognize the Cleveland COVID Relief Fund and all of the organizations that rallied really quickly to just have on-demand response to any number of problems that supported me and then K-12, but it supported the food banks, supported our hospital systems. There's a long list of foundations and businesses that really stepped up and didn't even ask questions, just stepped up and said, our community needs help. We don't know what it is, but we trust that that will help. So that's, this is already a hugely generous community, but that was just super rewarding at a time where, lots of us were turning and saying, to Kristin's point, she's got to buy twice as much food, but the money wasn't here yet. Where is that coming from, right? I had to buy technology and keep feeding my community, and I wasn't getting meal reimbursement because they weren't at school. But, both to keep people employed and fed, the show had to carry on. And so that emergency response of our community, and I talk to peers nationally, as I'm sure all of my colleagues do, that was not the case everywhere. It just wasn't. We kind of think of it as, well, probably every city did that. Not true. And then for me, the other that really stands up in my mind are all of the people who created learning pods for my kids. And that came out of us seeing suburban families set up learning pods for their kids, and us as a community saying, why can't my kids have what suburban families can have? And again, lots of cities that couldn't even do it, let alone do it at the scale that we were able to offer in this community and are still offering today, with people who really easily could have said, I'm not coming in and working with children who are hard to social distance and stay away from because they move around. And they did. They showed up, and the clinic actually donated all of the PPE and sanitation products for those, because again, these small agencies, many nonprofits, some of them as faith-based, they weren't getting stimulus fund to do this. They were doing it because it was right and necessary. So there's so many to be grateful for.
Cleveland is such a great community, and it's so generous. I mean, I'm always amazed by it. And watching business leaders step up in a big way, I look at the effort that Craig Arnold from Eaton and Fred Nance from Squire, Pat Boggs and Bill at G Lighting, they connected with PCs for People and donated a ton of equipment to help bridge that digital divide. And I mean, it's incredible when you think about how generous people were during this phenomenal crisis.
Mhm.
So as each of you reflect on how you had to pivot and innovate so quickly in response to the pandemic and the shutdown, what are some things that you learned or that you're doing differently that will carry forward beyond the pandemic?
So for us here, we've always communicated, but I will tell you, we're such a complex matrixed organization that we struggle to find commonalities as we communicate. I feel like currently we are over communicators. We are very, very transparent because we're sensitive to the fact that there is a lot going on under the iceberg that we can't see, the iceberg of people's lives. And so we're paying more attention to our employees, our caregivers, than we've ever done before. So before it was always patients first, and now it is actually patients and caregivers who come first. And so we do a lot now in that space of caring for the insights of people and building resilience and providing support even when people don't ask for it, because we know what's going on underneath, and then trying to get people back. I think that the clinic taking a stand of not furloughing anyone has really helped to build a lot of loyalty in the people who work for us, because people always thought of the Cleveland Clinic as this huge, big place that you were just a number. But I think it became palpable that the organization really cares. And when it matters, they stepped up and showed people that, you know what, you matter more than money to us. And even though our volumes were down and we knew we were going to lose money, that it was the right thing to do, and not let people go home, but reassure them.
I would say we are now a district where every student has a tablet or a computer, and that won't change. Thanks to the generosity of issue 68 and Cleveland voters, we are committed to that long term. We also are providing many of our families with internet access. That is still a temporary solution, but if I have my way, that will become permanent too. We must make the internet a public utility and not a privilege. And one of my worries about the pandemic is that as things have slowly felt a little more normal, I think we forget that people were suddenly told, go home and stay home, learn online, go to your doctor online, apply for unemployment online. And we were saying it to a whole lot of people that couldn't get online. And our country, candidly, does not yet get this problem. So when the pandemic occurred, the FCC's public campaign was Keep America Connected. Not Get America Connected, Keep America Connected. We can't keep a city connected that isn't connected. And so we have to make that a permanency out of this. And then with that, it opens so many opportunities for where and how my kids can learn. There's a lot that worked well in this pandemic. And we can't just look at what didn't work, but the kids that did great in remote classrooms, or kids who did their work in the evening because they worked during the daytime and were able to do so, and are already telling us, I'm not going back to the way it was because I don't have to, right? So there's a lot of opportunities that came out of this that we can leverage to create more nimble systems. And that's not true just in K-12. We've got to think about that at all levels of systems, going back to, a real opportunity to address some long-standing racial injustices. This is the one and only time where we don't have to change existing systems. The systems were obliterated. We just don't have to put them back.
I agree.
So one of the things that we learned that I think we'll continue to do is about the demand for home delivered meals. So the food bank had never offered any sort of delivery. We have lots of partners who do. We provide, in some cases, prepared meals or groceries for a long list of organizations who offer some sort of delivery, including Meals on Wheels partners. But when the pandemic first hit, our phones, we have a help center, were just ringing absolutely off the hook. And we discovered that there was just pretty long list of people for whom the traditional emergency relief system was not going to work. We couldn't find enough partners to deliver to seniors who were scared, staying home, running out of food, and had no family to bring them any. Or folks with disabilities who were struggling to get out of the house, again, worried about COVID. And also even people who had been quarantined, who were low income, whose food supplies were running low. And so we started, because honestly, we had no other choice. We couldn't find enough organizations who had that kind of delivery capacity. We started delivering groceries, and we're still doing that to hundreds of households every week. And these are the households that really, there's not a better solution. And so now we're looking at how could we do that at some level going into the future. And it just caused us to look at things differently. When you've got more to do and fewer hours in the day, I think it sometimes pushes you towards efficiencies that you didn't know were there. And so, some of those we'll definitely keep. Some really productive changes we made with our volunteer program to keep everybody safe, bring in fewer volunteers to work longer shifts. It's amazing how productive folks are on a longer shift. So, definitely there is good that has come of this, as well as frankly increased awareness of the issue of hunger and how many families are living right on the edge, barely making ends meet. And then something like this happens, or even a smaller emergency, and pushes folks right over the line. I think that there's a level of community awareness that people see and people have, which is going to be important to addressing hunger in the long run.
And I will also say, I will add to what you're saying there. Many times I think most businesses, they think that because you're taking care of employees, you're giving them health plans, you're giving them a salary, you just assume that they just have a right to show up every day and be fully on. But I think that we have really started to look under the iceberg of people's lives and trying to manage them from the inside out, because there are a lot of people who are hurting, who you never know anything, they show up, or sometimes they fail to show up, and we come down on them because we have these strict guidelines, about being late and how many days you miss and so forth. But when we started to really uncover some of the things in people's lives, like you say, food, right? People who show up every single day, but also a lot of psychosocial things. We saw an increased amount of domestic violence, and with kids as well, child abuse, because people then, when they were sequestered, a lot of these things came to the forefront. So I try as much as possible to, in our space, along with our leadership team, to be more permissive, to use more feedback to help people change their behavior and give them support, because I realize that there's some complexities. And like you said, I think that the political climate and the along with the racial tension that rose in this country over the last year, so vulnerable people are. And I think that the call for psychological support is actually bigger than you think. And I would say for all the leaders on the line, try to look at the humanistic side of the people who work for you, because there's a lot going on under the iceberg that you have no clue as well.
And I think more than ever, the importance of leading with compassion and empathy has been really driven home for so many leaders. And that's where you have to start, always. Because we're all human beings and we bring our baggage with us to everything we do. And you've got to view people that way that you're leading.
So let's continue to think about looking ahead. And as the pandemic is being mindful that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and we are not yet on the other side of this, what are the most meaningful aspects of support that you and your organization still need, that you would like to encourage the community to be mindful of at the stage we're at?
I think for us, I think we need people to continue to, be to show patience and grace as we go through this next big transition for lots of children. Again, nearly half of my kids are staying remote because their families are keeping them home. And that means that we have to schedule and operate 2 school systems, one that's running in hybrid and one that's running in remote. And you don't do that in a day. So today is our first day back. But that also means that there are kids and families going through some bumps because change is happening. And, people have built these relationships with their teachers, and now we have to have a teacher change. And so in the short term, continuing to remind people to support each other, to be graceful, to be patient. We've gotten through this. We will get through this again. But then the longer one for me is also remembering that, kids didn't lose the ability to learn. They lost time for that learning. And the pandemic is going to be over, but the learning time, the recovery is not. And so I'm worried that people are already playing a narrative of lost learning and, the lost kids. And that if we don't stay focused on this when the masks are gone, by making sure that we have really robust opportunities throughout this summer, that we have extended opportunities into the next year, what's the next 1, 2, 3 years look like, that we will actually bring that negative narrative to light or bring it to life. But if we do this right, if we stay focused on remembering what kids have experienced and their families have experienced and what we therefore must do in the next 1, 2, 3 years so that they come out of this healthy and positive, we can do it. I worry that in our desire to get back to normal, we will actually set up conditions that do leave people behind again, instead of setting up conditions that resolve what became obvious through the pandemic.
It's interesting you should say that, Eric. I heard a phrase this weekend that I hadn't heard before. Generation C is how they're referring to the kids that you're educating right now. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to carry that tagline with them their entire lives. And it really made me sad.
Yeah. On a kind of similar theme to Eric's comments, I think a lot about the fact that the economic impact of COVID-19 is going to last well beyond, I think, the disease itself. And the fact is that the folks who have been most affected by the economic impact are women and people of color and low-wage earners. And, those are the folks that we were already serving at the food bank, but their numbers have grown remarkably through this pandemic. We're putting together 5-year estimates for what it will cost us to respond, because we believe that we'll be responding for 5 years. And so, it is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And also I think for the first year, we were running a marathon at a sprinter's pace. We realized we can't do that forever. And so, and community support has been absolutely critical. I mean, the community has stepped up in just countless ways and really been kind of the silver lining for us over the course of the past year. But, we're looking for volunteers, certainly donors and also advocates, because there are government programs that can be improved. Waivers that have been provided during this pandemic that haven't been available before to help people connect to benefits that we now know work. And so, we want to advocate to keep those waivers that we now know work over the long run.
And I'm gonna toss this on top of everything that's been said. I remember in 1978, Jim Jones had this massacre in Guyana, and at the entry of this cult, the saying was, "Those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it." And then we had the 1918 flu, and here in Cleveland, they did not have a lot of deaths because people were prepared and they wore their masks. And then we had 9/11, and we were devastated, and we were going to change the world, and we forgot. And the bottom line is, we have, as humans, we tend to forget. And what I'm asking is that we would keep it a little fresh and not quickly want to get back to normal, because I think that that's going to be really important. I think that if we don't forget, then we are going to put people first. We're going to support more community projects. We're going to support learning in every way. We're going to get out and vote when we need to. And I think that we learn to pivot and be more agile and nimble, like Eric says, because that's what we're going to need going forward. Nothing is going to look the same like it has currently. We will never deliver healthcare the same way. People will never go back to working at work in buildings the same way anymore. So we have to change our paradigm. And then again, I think that the biggest pandemic that we're facing is mental health. That's been exposed based on this entire last year. And I think that we've got to prepare ourselves for that and help to support mental health. So.
But to build on all of what we have to do, and going back to Elizabeth, the Generation C, the renaissance that's going to come from these young people who have lived through this experience, I can't wait. The art, the music, the poetry, the theater that they're going to produce, right? The people who are going to be doctors or scientists so that they find the next cure or create the next vaccine. The people who are going to go into politics either because they didn't like or didn't like the way our leadership handled it. The people who want to tell the stories and work, for the next generation of papers, or the people that want to teach because of what a teacher did. So, I always have the beautiful benefit of the people who have all the optimism in the world and haven't been taught yet not to. When I dropped off my 5-year-old, I call her my granddaughter, at school today, and she was super excited to go into her classroom for the very first time. But I watched that same enthusiasm when she came over and jumped up on the couch and showed me her seesaw on her tablet and said, "Look what Miss Kelly's teaching me in my virtual world." So, there is a lot to do, and it's going to take a lot of time, but there is a renaissance that's coming behind this, like every big disruption causes, and we should not miss what we're about to see, and it's going to come from our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a moment and do a quick daydream, because we are going to eventually be beyond the restrictions of where we are now. What's the first thing you plan to do when those restrictions are done and you can unmask?
Hug more people. I miss hugging people.
Get a haircut.
I'm going to have a big in-person party to thank our team.
I'm celebrating I'll be starting my 11th year as superintendent in July, and this weekend I did book a vacation. I can't wait to be able to take a vacation.
That all sounds amazing. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mary Ann for a few additional questions.
Thanks. And thanks to all of you who chimed in with your questions. Those were awesome. You stole some of what I had wanted to ask, which is great. So again, I'm going to throw it to the four of you. You've got a lot of people here who have tried to lead during the course of the past year and are looking at a still uncertain future. What piece of leadership advice would you give to all of us?
Compassion for the people who work in your space, because sometimes we think, well, you have a job, isn't that good enough? I would go there. And then the other is be nimble and agile. We don't know what's coming down the pike, but we're going to have to adapt to it.
Yeah.
And I'd say practice self-care. You know, the advice on the airplane is always put your mask on first. And I think leaders sometimes forget the importance of taking care of yourself, because if you're fried and burned out, you're not doing anyone any good.
Agree. We have a colleague here who said early in the pandemic, we're just going to have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that really stuck. She is often quoted now, and it's a reminder to all of us that, you know what, we're just going to have to try new things because that's the only option. And I think that our team has gotten really creative and flexible and willing to take risks, because there was no other choice, right? And so getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is one of the best pieces of advice I was given, for sure.
I would just offer again, bounded optimism and deliberate calm. Let people know that it's going to be okay, and here's what we're going to do. People are looking for somebody to remind them that we are going to be okay. And, you know, we're leaders because people want someone to follow. And it is all of the compassion and nimbleness and everything we talked about, but people, you know, they need their leaders to be able to assure them that we will get through this. And here's what we're going to do to get there.
Yeah,
I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal that from you, Eric.
I stole it from someone else.
That's what this is all about, exchanging great ideas and offering
Yeah.
support. That was excellent. So we've all learned a lot, probably more than we ever anticipated we would learn over the course of the past year. And I know I've made a ton of mistakes. I suspect you may have made one or two along the way as well. So as you look back, is there anything that you would have done differently or lesson learned?
You know, I will say that I always thought about building resiliency in myself and in my children, but I never really thought that I could help a whole hospital build resilience. And I have found that having the opportunity in this space to do that, because we had to, I would say it's probably been the biggest lesson I've learned. And so, so much so that we're now really ramping up on a lot of the resiliency training and activities that people aren't even going to know that we're building their resilience. But we've got things planned in order to make this whole space resilient. And the reason is because we're preparing for a new future. Things are just not going to be the same in healthcare. And we've got to prepare people to take them along and not have them sort of, push back. And I think building resiliency is going to be key, and being transparent and over communicating and becoming more over communicators like we are. So, yeah.
I think Eric made a comment like this earlier. At the beginning, everybody was talking about this curve. And so I really kind of thought there was going to be a curve and then it was going to be over, right? And maybe that curve was going to last a couple of months. And so, we were running at this crazy pace. There was no vacation time, right? It was all hands on deck all the time, 7 days a week. Until I realized that actually this was not a couple months, right? This is something that was going to go on for a really long time. And we had to, I was really worried that we were going to burn people out, that folks couldn't continue to work like that indefinitely, certainly. And so we had to really do almost an about face. We went from no vacation to everybody take a vacation, like everybody take a day off. What can we do? Because we weren't prepared for how long it was going to last at the beginning. And so that's, if I'd known, and in hindsight, I think I'd be better prepared for something like that.
Yeah, so true. I remember telling our CLC team, we'll be back together in a couple of weeks. Wrong.
And I agree. I think that I was, I became hypervigilant, and if I could look back now and tell myself one thing, I would say, you know what, trust all of the teams that support you. Because I was hypervigilant and I was in here every single day. Now I was getting a little bit of reward that I wasn't saying to anybody, but I was enjoying silently. And that is the right to work. I felt like it was in my own world. Every street is my street. And so I was enjoying that, but I was showing up here every single day. And I think that I wish some days I went more and walked in the woods, but I actually felt so important to be here and to be visible. And I would change that next time. I would really trust a little bit more in the process.
Eric, Elizabeth?
Yeah, it's really a hard question to answer. I mean, the easy part is yes, I made all kinds of mistakes. I know I made all kinds of mistakes. What would I do differently? I don't know, because they stack on top of each other. And so each decision led to the next layer or act or move. And I just have a hard time thinking, well, if I had done this, what might have happened instead? So, I know we made hundreds of decisions we might not have made, the same way again. It's a great question. I'm still just kind of pondering on, the governor said once on one of his press conferences, the next time there's a pandemic, I'll know better what to do. And that's kind of how I've treated that, every time somebody says, well, why'd you do that? I'm like, well, because it's a pandemic and I didn't know what else to do, So right. It's a harder question than it might sound.
Yeah, and a year, 2 years from now, the things that you thought were mistakes may turn out to have been absolutely brilliant and well-informed. Yeah.
And someone in the chat put steady and kind leadership. I like that. Thank you for that.
Great. Well, we are bumping right up against our 1 o'clock hour, and thank you. I think that those are the most important 2 words it can say, not just for giving of an hour today when you've got kids going back to school and phones ringing off the hook and things that need your attention that are really urgent, but thank you for your leadership over the past 368 days when you had to immediately figure out what new leadership looked like. As you've probably all heard me say in our programs, leaders show up, and you have showed up in such a big way over the course of the past year. Your organizations function 24/7, but so do you as leaders. And in addition, you're very heavily involved in the community. So thank you for everything.